I'm Carol Klein, and this is my home, Glebe Cottage. When I'm not presenting or writing about gardening, this is where I spend most of my time, and where I've been honing my horticultural skills for 40 years. Whether you've got a spacious plot, a tiny patio, or a few window boxes, there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than creating your own garden. From basic to more advanced techniques, I believe anyone can learn how to do it. Whether you're a complete novice or an experienced gardener, I want to help you develop the skills to make your garden grow. I'm ready. Are you? Welcome back to my garden on another glorious day. Aren't we lucky? And what better greeting than this? This is Exocorda. Isn't it beautiful? It's my favourite shrub, I think, especially at this time of year. It's at its very best. It's done it just for you. This glorious collection of little tiny spheres, and each one bursts into these chalices of white with this green middle, which sets them off beautifully and makes them look even whiter. These branches cascade right down to the lower level, so you get the full fountain effect. Anyway, enough about that. Come and have a look at the rest of the garden. Throughout the garden and beyond, nature's really speeding things up. All these trees are coming into leaf. Everything's beginning to happen. This ginkgo is Neil, my husband's only tree. But it's lovely, especially at the moment. Look at it against that conifer. All these little buds just starting to open. But the real, most important tree is this beautiful acer. My mum bought it for us when we first came here, and I can remember it was about this big, and she and I planted it very carefully. So every single time I walk up and down the garden, no matter what time of year it is, I think of her. Now, this little tree constitutes a much more recent memory. I planted it last summer, and I'm so thrilled to see it not only survive, but full of blossom. It's a crabapple. It's called Malus Everest. But when I planted it, I did not stake it, and I didn't stake it on purpose, because I wanted it to rely on its own roots, to really fasten it into the ground. And it seems to have paid off, because the trunk is very, very straight. My philosophy is very simple. I choose lots of plants that look after themselves. That's not the first and the primary reason for choosing them. I choose them because they're beautiful and they grow together brilliantly well. But if they're sturdy and steadfast, all the better. But all these plants in here are going to look after themselves with a couple of exceptions, and the peony is one of them. But eventually, especially after we've had a bit of rain, this will be right up here, and those stems have to support enormous flowers. Of course, it's got a tendency to grow forwards towards the sun, so I'll definitely stake it. Now, I mean, I could use something like, could use something like this, but I don't think the peony's actually going to make it to the top of there, even when those bottom legs are really pushed into the ground. So I'll probably end up using several bamboos and string, but always I try and make sure that it doesn't spoil the plant, so they'll be under the flowers. Well, although there are lots of things down here, and in the other flower beds and borders that I don't stake at all, there are a few things in the veg garden that really do need a helping hand. These of the objects of my desire. But look at them, my peas have they've gone mad. They're growing into one another and they're definitely going to be in need of some assistance when I take them out. And I think I might be in need of some assistance to actually get them out from where they're growing. Oh, they're growing right into the bench. Come on, time to go outside. Look at that. Oh, here we go. Beef, what do you think? Straight? Yep. The inspector says yes. I mean, peas are one of the most delicious vegetables you can grow. And there are two different ways you can grow them. You can either sow them directly into the ground, in which case you make a shallow trench about a couple of inches deep and sow them. We did it last year, actually. Sow them just a few inches apart, 3 across the row, and then right through the row to the other end. And the other way to do it is as I've done these, and these are all sown individually, 1 per compartment of a module tray. You don't have to have a fancy module tray or anything. Anything you can do that you can just divide up to ensure that when your peas come out, their roots don't get tangled with the roots of the one next door. The most crucial question when you're deciding which vegetables to grow is, what do you like to eat? And a gentleman came once and showed me about 200 photographs of his prized carrots. And I asked him how he liked to eat them, and he said, oh, I don't eat them. I just grow them for exhibition. These are supposed to be growing up like this, but at the moment they're prostrate peas. There you are. Don't worry, help is at hand. Stakes to the rescue. Dun, dun, dun. For better results, peas need staking. The traditional way is to use pea sticks. Now this is a great big bundle of, they're not actually hazel twigs, they're beech that came from our native hedge around here when it's been laid. Peas just want to climb. They don't climb really high like, you know, your runner beans or any of those big growing beans, but they do all have a certain height. This one is Hurst green shaft and it grows to about 2 or 3 feet. Nice bushy plants, and of course it won't just be the top flowers which bear peas, but all the side shoots too will flower and then produce peas. The more assistance we can give them to climb up high, the better. The dog's off, she's heard a pheasant somewhere. Yeah, you tell them, Fifi. Ow. You know, you're doing this now, and the whole idea is that later on you're going to be enjoying the fruits of your labour, or in this case, the peas. To help your young pea plants get off to a flying start, plant out a few inches apart, then provide simple branches or twiggy sticks to climb. Water regularly and wait for the climbing to commence. Next, I get up close to a floral beauty that also loves to climb. Good job, I'm trained as a steeplejack. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou? Can't find him anywhere. This is my wonderful, wonderful Banksian rose. I absolutely adore it. I really wanted to be greeted by these lovely little double pale yellow flowers. Well, as you can see, it's nearly obscuring the window, and they make ideal material for cuttings. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to snip a few off and then show you the next step. You never thought gardening was a dangerous occupation. Don't laugh if I fall out, will you? Good job, I trained as a steeplejack. Here we go. So I've got 3 lovely big shoots. I'll see you down there. Well, taking cuttings of any rose is very straightforward, but these lovely springy new shoots are ideal cutting material. So any soft cutting you take at any time really is liable to start wilting because you've robbed it of its source of water, which is the roots. You cut it off, and that's why they're in a plastic bag. And then the object of the exercise is to cut just underneath there, just under a leaf node. A leaf node is just the point at which the leaf joins the stem. Nice clean cut, remove that bottom leaf, take off another leaf, and then there. So I'm not using this bendy top half. The new growth, when it comes, will come from these little leaf axils here. Now, because you've robbed your cutting of its source of water, you want to water it thoroughly first of all, and then every time I walk past it I'll get one of those little sprays that you use when you're doing the ironing, full of water, and I'll give it a quick squirt just to maintain that moisture around it. And then some grit. I use grit to keep the weeds down, to retain the moisture within the soil, and to stop your cuttings from rotting. So I'm going to put these under the stage in my greenhouse, anywhere, kitchen windowsill, but not in direct sunlight, because that'll scorch the leaves. You know when it's rooted, because not only will these have perked up, but when you look at the hole in the bottom here, white roots will be poking out, and that's a very exciting moment. If you want to give rose cuttings a try, fill a pot with gritty compost. Then give it a good soak. Take your cuttings from below a leaf node. Then grow them on in a warm but sheltered spot. All over the garden, you can really feel sunlight's dappled by the shade of new leaves, and new sights abound in the hedgerows. That's it. Let's sit and have a look at the garden, shall we? Yeah. Although you're looking at it from a different point of view than me, but I've seen all sorts of new things. I hadn't even noticed that cherry over there. And I remember vaguely planting it, wasn't quite sure where to put it. And it's in full flower now. Cherry blossom is a fleeting and beautiful sight, but roses can give you a scented display for much longer. There are lots of different categories of roses. So there are hybrid teas, which are the ones you grow for these perfect flowers, but a few straight stems. Then there are climbers, there are scramblers, and then there are shrub roses. And shrub roses are a big, wide group, but amongst the most useful plants you could possibly have in your garden. And that's what I'm going to plant in this container. Now, the rose that I've chosen, it's one of the English roses. They seek to incorporate into their breeding all the best qualities of the old roses. So beautiful scent, glorious flowers. They'll go on flowering for ages and ages, because that's another quality that these English roses have. They've got very scented flowers. Now, I'm not going to plant it directly in this pot. Inside here, carefully secreted, is a big plastic pot. It'll grow very well in here. There are plenty of drainage holes all around the side. And the reason I don't want to grow it in this pot is eventually it will outgrow its space. So that's perfect. Now, I don't really need any crocks in the base of it because I've got some fairly free draining compost here. But this is Again, a loamy mix. Plenty of soil content in this. It's sterilised loam, so I shouldn't get any weeds in there. Plus a bit of multi-purpose and a sprinkling of grit to make sure it's free draining. Out it comes. And it's got really, really good roots. So I'll lower it down. Yeah, it's just about sitting pretty. But then I must make sure that there's absolutely no air left in here, so I want you to fill in with compost all the way around. And of course the frost won't kill it, but it is a deciduous shrub. In other words, it'll lose its leaves. So in the winter it's just going to be this fair framework, but then in the spring those shoots will start again. And just think, you'll be able to cut some of those roses too and actually take them indoors. If you want to enjoy the scent of roses on your patio, English shrub roses are a perfect choice. Plant your pot within a pot and water well. In warm weather, give them a good soak every couple of days. Planting pots for summer colour couldn't be a better way to spend an afternoon. But now I'm going to check on the new cut flower garden I started recently. As always, there are distractions, like this. It's a plant called Lathyrus vernus. Now Lathyrus, lots of you will know, is the name for a sweet pea. It's a family name. Vernus just means spring, and these are spring flowering sweet peas. They don't climb though. They just stay in these very, very neat clumps, and they're absolutely loaded with flowers. Those flowers will be followed by these delightful little pods, and on a hot, hot day when the pods are ripe, you can actually hear them bursting and sending their seed here, there and everywhere. It's a really beautiful little plant. What a lovely sight. Mini sweet peas popping up in my path. Now it's time to check on the climbing variety I sowed recently. Oh, look at these! They're up! They're away. These are the sweet pea seeds we sowed in these toilet roll middles, and yeah, I think they're all just about there now. Those will be for later. I'll probably be planting some of these out around the garden and on a couple of obelisks, just for a bit of extra height. But I want to add a few more things to our cut flower garden. So I want to sow a couple of things directly. In less than 2 weeks, these empty beds have been transformed into a space for growing cut flowers. And it's planted very differently from the way I plant any other part of my garden, because it doesn't attempt to be creative or put the right things next to the right plants. All that we're interested in here is actually harvesting this crop of flowers. So everything's growing in little rows, just for ease of cutting. So eventually these things are going to be up here and I'm going to be chopping away and making these great big bunches of flowers. So I'm just making a little teeny trench. It's only sort of a centimetre deep or so. So I'm going to add a couple of very exciting things. The first one is, it's a larkspur. I'm just going to tear the top of here. I love larkspur. It's such a pretty thing. It's like, if you don't know it, it's like a mini delphinium, but it's an annual rather than a perennial. So just a few seeds on there. This soil's damp because I've been watering these plants that are already in there, and I've watered the bits in between too. Never sow your seed into dry soil. Really bad idea. Then when you run your can over the top of it, it'll probably just swish them all out. And I'll just sow them very, very sparsely, just holding my hand a couple of inches above the soil. And those should be up in a few weeks' time. And that's it. Couldn't really be much easier than that. As well as sowing seed directly, I've also got some plug plants, perfect to put in now. Right, that's a lovely rudbeckia. It's an annual. I grow lots of perennial rudbeckia further up the garden, but this makes a brilliant cut flower. Big yellow daisies, sometimes with mahogany centres as well. Very, very straightforward. Soil's nice and damp, in they go. A plant like this will yield maybe, I don't know, between 10 and 20 heads of flower. Imagine this in the summer and then way into the autumn too. Absolutely everything in here is beloved by bees and pollinators of different kinds. The scabious will be covered in butterflies. You'll not be able to see the flowers. It's rather lovely being down here actually. I don't feel like moving. Surrounded by all these plants. Look at this big swathe of that geranium. It's the first geranium to flower really. It's a form of geranium phaeum. To me it just says, you know, this time of the year, isn't it? Late spring, but really relishing the prospect of summer and the autumn beyond. Next, plants to enjoy whatever the season. Look at this. We've gone fern crazy. It's a crisp morning here in the garden, but in shady corners of the countryside, one group of plants is feeling right at home. And that is ferns. I'm surrounded by them here. They're just beginning to burst through. And they are truly prehistoric. I mean, you almost expect to see some dinosaur rambling through the woods. Just look at the way that they've inhabited these banks. They take it over. It's their domain. It's damp, it's shady, it's perfect. When I started my garden, I just felt that ferns would play a starring role. Well, all over my garden, especially in the shady part of it, there are ferns galore. They don't sack seed. It's their spores that are carried by the wind and find all these wonderful places that suit them perfectly. Now, this is a perfect example. This is the male fern, Dryopteris felix mus. And a few weeks ago, you couldn't see it at all, but now those great fists are just punching themselves up in the air. And it'll go on right the way through the summer, looking green and gorgeous. Well, that's the male fern. Come and have a look at the lady. And here she is. Isn't she just so pretty? This is Ethereum felix femina, the lady fern, and I adore it. And I think it's very aptly named. It's delicate, it's pretty. She's so lovely and she's beautiful at this green stage, but also in the late autumn as she begins to fade. She turns into all sorts of beige, gorgeous tapestry colours, and always you can see this delicate, finely ferny fronds. Well, I just chose this one to match my jacket. Isn't it lovely? It's not native to this country, but it looks perfectly at home. It's an adiantum, a kind of maidenhair fern. And there are lots of different ones too. Now this adiantum is completely hardy. It has to live outside. But there are lots of other maidenhairs that make wonderful house plants. Look at this. We've gone fern crazy. Because of course they make totally brilliant houseplants. And if you haven't got a garden, but you're mad about plants, what else are you going to do? So here's an adiantum too, but this one, this maidenhair fern, is one that you must grow indoors. It's tender. Look at the range. All these different shaped fronds, all these different colours too, this lovely bluey grey one. Aren't they lovely, these glaucous leaves? It's an epiphyte. All that means is that instead of living in the soil, it lives on the branches of trees. Don't try and grow your ferns in a nice, bright, sunny place, because that'll frizzle the fronds. So watering's very, very important. Always just feel the top of your pots and make sure that it does feel moist. And when you're going to water them, don't use water straight out of the tap. Put a bit of warm in there too. And don't forget, every so often, just give them a light misting, just so they feel completely at home. From a houseplant to a mouseplant. Yeah, a mouseplant. This is the most charming little plant. Its Latin name is Arasarum proboscideum. It's usually known as the mouse plant, simply because lurking or running around under these big green leaves, you find all these tiny little mice, these beautiful little aroid flowers, and each one of them has a long curly tail. What are these? What are these? You like mice, don't you? Maybe not, but whatever the weather, Fifi can't resist a grooming. I'm just giving Fifi a Mohican. Yeah. The shady parts of my garden are gradually greening up. Where once snowdrops and hellebores signified the spring, I now have autumn pictures to plan for. The other week we looked at quite a few of these. This is Anemone namorosa, the wood anemone. But by the time we get to midsummer, most of these will have gone to sleep for the year. But I want to put a few things in here which are really going to exploit that opportunity and give us some real colour under the trees in that latter part of the year. Now the plant I want to put in here is something very special. It's not a straightforward Japanese anemone, but it's this. Got a lovely big potful there, it's just been waiting to go in here. And it's an anemone called Wild Swan. It has beautiful white flowers. They're touched with blue on the back of the flower, on the reverse. And unlike Japanese anemones, which spread prolifically, occasionally becoming a bit of a nuisance, some people say, this stays in one clump. In the shady part of my garden, making plans for autumn colour is hugely satisfying. Oh, you go that way and I'll go this way. Now I want to ensure the veggie garden will be at its best in late summer. Oh, Sylvie, look what I've got. Yes. That's my prize pumpkin. Well, it's nice to see what I grew. So this one is called Winter Crown Prince. Some people call it a squash, some people call it a pumpkin. Doesn't matter. And rather than sowing them outside, because then it's very, very hit and miss, if we have any frost, it would just kill them, I always try and sow them individually in pots. Well, I've pre-filled this tray and it's got straightforward potting compost in here. Bit of grit, just to make sure that everything drains well. So here's this one. So I'll tip them out. I've got 5. Well, that should give us about, I don't know, 10 to 15 of these lovely squashes. And the whole idea is, can you see they're flat seeds and they're oval, and you just push them down on their side into the compost. The reason you don't put them down flat like that and push them down is because they very often rot if you do that, Whereas if you sow them on their side, the root gets a chance to push down into the soil and the shoot gets a chance to push up. As well as pumpkins, I love growing courgettes. And this one is called Zucchino Albarello di Sarzana. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but it's an Italian one grown in the north of Italy, and it produces a really bountiful crop. So just a couple of plants is enough for an average family. I've got one here that I couldn't resist trying an early sowing, and I just put a few seeds into a module. There's a bit of space beside my broad beans. This is the best one of them so far. Absolutely wonderful. If you haven't got a greenhouse, a warm windows is perfectly adequate. To give pumpkins and courgettes the best possible start, sow the seeds on their side in the compost. Water them well and grow them on in a warm place until they're established plants. That's better. It's a bit brisk today, and it's going to be even more brisk when these little plants are ready to be harvested. This is my parsnip experiment. I love parsnips. I love that whole Christmas dinner thing, but if I sow parsnips straight into my soil, they take ages to germinate for a start. So I thought I'd try them like this. I've started them off just one seed per little division, per module. And I've let them grow on a bit. Now they've got to be potted on before they start making that proper big root in here. Otherwise, it'll divide, they'll split up. It'll be just like when they're in the soil and they hit a rock, a stone, you know, a lump of hard clay, and the roots fork. So I'm going to grow them on in these long pots until they're a decent size, and then I'm going to plant them out in the garden. Can you see? Very fibrous root, but no big tapering root yet. Just push them in. Hello, come on. Oh, have you come to watch? We're doing a parsnip experiment. Are you going to help? I don't think you like parsnips, do you? With Fifi for company, all these baby parsnip plants need is a slightly bigger pot of compost to grow on. I'll probably be harvesting them, you know, just before Christmas and then for the next couple of months. But when we come back in the autumn, they should be really well established, be big solid plants out there, and we can see how they're getting along. Now here's an experiment that has worked, or it's beginning to work anyway. A few weeks ago I got this big pot, put compost in about halfway down and pushed 3 beautiful sprouted, well-chitted King Edward potatoes in here. And the whole idea is that as these grow, and look at these wonderful sprouts on them now, they're brilliant. I'm going to put more and more compost in, and I'll keep on doing that almost at the top of these little shoots, because then the potatoes will push up further, and that means there's more and more space under here with all this earth. So more and more potatoes will be bigger and better than ever. And now I want to start topping this up. When they've grown up to the top of here, I'll put more compost in. So in the end, we're going to end up with this brimful of compost and these lovely big luscious shoots coming out of the top. And then we'll get to the exciting bit, probably about sort of July, August, and we can tip that whole lot out and see our crop. Next, bulbs for autumn and how to make even more dahlias. I'm so thrilled with them, I really am. I can feel the sun on the back of my neck. It's lovely and warm. And these euphorbia flowers are just sending out great waft of the most beautiful scent, kind of honeyed perfume. And of course, that's meant to attract all these pollinators in there. These tulips have been wonderful. They're still going strong. And I've got lilies coming on here. They'll go all through the summer. Today though, it's all about planting bulbs that will delight in the autumn. This is Gladiolus calliantha. This is the most elegant and beautiful flower, great wide white flowers. This is something I used when our youngest daughter got married. We had pots and pots of this. I think I potted up about 1,000 of them. So, enough about that. I've half filled these. They've got crocks in the bottom, broken bits of plant pot or stone, and then half fill them with a good potting compost, and I'm going to squeeze as many as I can into there. It's a good idea when you're potting any bulbs or corms, just to make sure that they don't quite touch one another, just in case one of them decides it's not going to grow properly. With all bulbs, you always make sure that that base plate there that the roots are going to come from is pointing downwards. It sounds pretty obvious, but you can plant bulbs upside down. They'll still try and grow, of course, because plants just want to grow. And then do a bit of multitasking, just potting up corms and stroking cats. What could be nicer? Just to finish it off, some grit. Well, I hope you're going to be able to enjoy these when you revisit us in the autumn, because they'll be up by September and looking their glorious best. I can't wait to show you. To ensure a splendid show, plant your bulbs pointed side up, base plate down. Top up the pots with a gritty compost, and finally a decent drink. In this hot weather, it's something the veg garden would really welcome too. Hello. How's me? Oh, look at our spuds. They're all showing now, these first 3 rows. Absolutely brilliant, but it's been so dry. I'm going to give them a good old soak. Oh, sorry, Kat. Before the spuds were here, there were dahlias, which I've dug up, potted on, and now I can take cuttings to make even more. I'm so thrilled with them, I really am. I've got lots of dahlias, but I always want more. I mean, they're such brilliant plants. Flower all summer long, right into the autumn. And these cuttings I'm going to take now will actually make decent sized plants just in one season. And during that season, they'll make tubers of their own, so I'll be able to repeat the process. Basil cuttings are just that, cuttings taken at the base of a stem. The whole idea is that these shoots have come straight out of the tubers, and what you're trying to do is detach the shoot low down into the soil. Here we go. You slide your knife down, and do use a sharp knife until you feel like you're almost at the tuber, and then just cut across. Oh yes, it does. Yeah. Look at that. So we've got a nice slanted cut there, which is ideal. Again, some multi-purpose, a bit of sterilised loam, lots of grit, because these cuttings want to drain really well. Fill your pots virtually to the top, and I'm just going to push that right down, nice and firmly without bending the stem at all, and I'll get ready for the next one.
Nhà vắng lành quạnh hiu vườn sao cây trái tiêu điều cột siêu gió giông muôn chiều, buồn thương vẫn dương canh trường, tôi mãi gọi mình à, mình à, mình ơi. Tình vẫn còn thì thương, ví dầu hát câu mong chờ, thuyền ngài xuôi quay về bờ, mai đợi chờ trong ngóng hoài mong.
So the roots will form here and under these leaf nodes here. There'll be lots and lots of fibrous roots, and then eventually they'll build up into tubers, and they're the ones that you'll be able to store over the next winter too. So again, right down the side of your pot, I'm pushing that down so it's in intimate contact, both with the compost and with the pot. So when I've watered them, I'll put them back into the greenhouse until there's absolutely no danger of frost, because they're tender plants. Growing food to eat or flowers to admire is the reason I garden. But putting together plants that I've propagated from scratch is the icing on the cake. When I'm planting these places in the brick garden, I always try and get the plants to sort of flow down the hill and also sort of connect one bed with another. So I want to use a few of the things that I've used elsewhere. I put that gorgeous geranium Roseanne over on the other side, and I think that ought to be in the foreground. And then this was the Helenium that we divided the other day. So it's got big, bright yellow petals, but it's also got this sort of velvety doorknob middle that's just really bronze. These are those little plants of dill, some of which we've put into the herb pot and some into our little window box. Dill has got the most beautiful foliage, but if I persuade these to flower by not watering them too frequently, the flowers are dainty as anything. First in is the Helenium, but its roots need a quick snip. Now if I just bung that in, I'll squash all those roots. So I'm just going to trim them all across there. I wish this was me going to the hairdressers. Never mind, that'll happen soon. Isn't it funny when you put little plants in like this? You know, I mean, just these little green things, but you already know what's going to happen. Watching the garden wake up and grow again this spring has been a delight. From the early petals of primroses to the tall heads of tulips, and now roses signposting the summer. So Fifi and Sylvie and the rest of the animals, even the pheasant too, we've really enjoyed sharing the garden with you this spring. It's been brilliant. And we hope you're going to join us again in the autumn when everything will be different, everything will be changed. Bye for now, and we'll see you very, very soon. Off you go.